So I'm gonna start from the end and work my way to the beginning, and I'll have a better. I'm gonna use a mic. Have this mic'd. It'll sound better later, but for now it is what it is. And you'll hear me from time to time. I'll mention about my teeth. You know, I'm a disabled veteran, and all disabled veterans, United States disabled veterans, you know, the way that our Congress and Senate, our representatives have fucked over our veterans, disabled veterans. You have to have a 100% VA rating, 100%, in order to get any dental care. Meaning that, you know, if you have an infection, a bodily infection from a tooth, you can't get a fucking antibiotic from the VA because it's from a tooth. And I'm telling you the truth. This has happened to me before, whereas, you know, I've gone in with infections because of my teeth. I've suffered with my teeth for years. You know, I lived in Posity. You know, my injuries from my service to our nation, by no fault of my own, I was injured, and they led to me being disabled. You know, challenged with a myriad of things, but you know, the two major injuries were that my spine. I needed to have 2 spinal fusions, but you know, that's just part of it. You know, there's other injuries I've had, and also when I'm a dual branch veteran. The other service I was in the Air Force, regular Air Force, a career airman, and I started off though in the Army National Guard. And in the Army National Guard, you see, what had happened was that I had dropped out of high school in my junior year, and here's what happened. I mean, I went in. The recruiter had to come out to my parents' house, and you know, they rented off of my dad. My dad worked for Medusa Cement Company there in near Wampum, Pennsylvania. Wampum. The only time I've ever heard wampum mentioned is in a monologue that Oliver Stone wrote for his telling of what happened to him in Vietnam, Platoon. He mentions wampum. But anyway, that's where I was raised, is in wampum. But the recruiter had to come out to and have my parents sign me over to the federal government in order for me to go through training. Everybody goes through, you know, the same training. You know, it isn't, if you're a guardsman or a reservist, you are active duty while you are going through training, basic training, and then your active individual training, AIT. So anyway, you know, it's the other thing that happened to me in that service is several things, but this, you know, when I was, you know, because I was a high school dropout, I think that's what it was. You see, I was flagged. You hear this now. You see, the MOS that they talked me into going into, there was a bonus for it, and it was a really easy job, you know, and basically in communications. The only, you know, thing that with you know, it was a point-to-point communications specialist, putting tactical wire, laying tactical wire between Holisters and where they directed the fire from, you know, like that type of point-to-point communications, laying down like physical wire. That's the way they used to do it. I don't know about now, but. And the you know, the other part of that job is dangerous. It's all, you know, it's dangerous, but you know, you can also be like a forward observer, which is, you know, that adds a little bit of more respectability to the job. You know, anyway. But look, anyone basically can do that job, and I wondered about it. I'm like, okay, what the hell am I getting a bonus for this? You know, I was 16, then turned 17, you know, when I volunteered. So I went to boot camp, I was 17, and turned 18, you know, while going through boot camp at Fort Jackson in 1983. But, you know, when we were going through our to get our immunizations and shots, all that shit, they split us off into a separate line. And I said, what? Because I had an adrenaline hit. It was like, one of those really strange things, because I never get an adrenaline hit. It has to be something that is really the real deal, for me to get a hit. And I had one. And I'm like, I asked the nurse, I said, we're in a separate line. I said, why did they separate us? I whispered, like, why'd they separate us? And she just looked at me like she had so much pity for me. And I was like, oh, what the fuck? What the fuck are they doing? I knew. I was quickened about it. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? I was like, I was a believer, in Christ, my faith in the Son of God. But, I was like weak in knowledge, or wasn't in the Word. I was raised a Catholic where you don't get a lot of knowledge. And that's the way it is. And so, but I was praying. I'm like, Lord, what is, I was like, I knew something was up, and so here's what happened. All of us guardsmen, and I don't know how many reservists were in the line, but all of us that were in that line, we got so goddamn sick we barely made it through training. And then they sent us back through, us that were so sick, to get other shots. I'm like, man, they fucking gave us something, man, to experiment or whatever with us, right? Then as the years go by, it turned out it was flagged, when I had, because I didn't have health care for years, and this is after I got out, because I needed my high school diploma in order to go into the regular Air Force. So I needed a few credits. I was able to get that done, to graduate then, as the rest of my class, and would have, if I would have, what I'm saying is you wouldn't know that I'd quit school because I got the same diploma, that I would have if I wouldn't have dropped out, because I only needed a few credits. But I just say that because I got my GED going through Army boot camp, though. The Army only required the GED. The Air Force wanted a high school diploma. Why am I telling you this? I don't know. It's because I think that the fact that I was a high school dropout, that's what flagged me. And the special MOS and everything. I'm saying that that's what the signal was in order for me to be separated into that shot line and given that pathogen, which was, through a blood test that I had, after getting out of the Air Force, it was found out it was a retrovirus. So whatever they had, given me, then had it did bind with me. Woman I'm with, my wife now of going on 34 years, she never got it. And every time it would surface, rear its head, whenever my immune system would get hit, what have you, and we're talking years, I didn't have nothing, no health care. And when I did get that blood test, I had it for, just a short while. My wife was working at Greater New York Insurance in Manhattan, and she had some health care, and that's how I, had the blood drawn, and it was, found out that I had, that's what it was, is the retrovirus. And that's what I was given in that shot line. Now, for years, man, like all these years have gone by, that's we're talking about over 43 years ago. I know, it's hard to believe. 43 years ago, I was given that goddamn virus. And so many times over these years, I'd get so sick, it could have killed me. I was taking, I'd go into a pet store and buy ciprofloxacin, for fish. That's I learned, which antibiotics would help, with this, because some wouldn't. Like penicillin wouldn't, amoxicillin wouldn't, a multi-spectrum antibiotic would help, because this virus would cause me to have, an infection in my chest. It would manifest like bronchitis and walking pneumonia. That's what it would, and it was really bad. Every time, the same way, the same symptoms. I'd recognize, son of a bitch, and all I had was, my mother had, had some horses, and she was able to get me some Bactrim, that for horses, antibiotic that she would get. And that was a tough antibiotic. It would help though. And I would do like massive doses of vitamin C and, echinacea, shit, whatever, like natural, whatever, like home remedies, what have you, because I didn't have health care, but it was tough. And you reason with that. You're like, well, that's why they chose guardsmen, reservists. You go back to your unit and you don't have you're no expense to the government. Whatever contractor was given that secret virus program to handle that shit, then to monitor, the subjects that they used, me and so what other National Guardsmen and reservists. You see, they just monitor them from afar and can attain records, what have you, to know what somebody gets sick and succumbs to what disease. They would know whatever the cocktail was of pathogens maybe they experimented with. I know this, when I went to AIT at Fort Gordon, I barely made it through Fort Jackson. When it came time for the us doing our run and push-ups, sit-ups, and all that, I was in the best shape of my life. I was 17, turned 18, going through training, and I barely made it through that. It was tough. It was really tough. And there, how many guys that were in my platoon, I could see, we were all in that same boat. But then there were guys that they were unscathed, that didn't get the shot. And I wondered about that, like, what is with this that not everybody got this? Because when I went to AIT, the bay that I was in, here's what's so strange. I was in a bay, 8 guys in a bay. They got what I had. They caught it, and those 7 guys were taken away. They were all taken out of the bay. I was the last guy in the bay, And then there was an epidemic at Fort Gordon. This is in 1983 when I finished boot camp. Even with all those challenges, man, I managed to pass. What they needed to qualify. My God, it was horrible. But I don't even remember my training at Fort Gordon. That's how sick I was. But I was stubborn. I was like, I'm not going to be recycled. I had that kind of mentality. And, kind of like a mental toughness about it. I really did. Oh, Lord, it was rough. And, when I went back to my battalion, in Newcastle, it was, I told my commander, my CO, and first sergeant, what had happened. I was like, man, they gave me something. I said, I barely made it through training. I was telling them how sick I was, and, they didn't want to hear anything about it. Nobody did. Nobody wanted to even hear what I had to say. And I was like, I went in, then my platoon, I was like telling everyone, and they're like, nobody wanted to hear. They're like, they were like hushing me up, hush, hush, don't even talk about it. Ain't that something? But that shit, it was really a challenge for me over these years. But I'm just saying, because, I got the injuries in the Air Force that led to my having to have 2 spinal fusions, and I was given that retrovirus there. Used as in a secret virus program. But that's really what happened. I'm sure there's a record of it. 1983, Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then Fort Gordon, Georgia. Because I do remember. I don't remember my training. I honestly don't at Fort Gordon. That's how sick I was. Brain fog from that virus. But I do remember one, I remember the sickness in the bay. So sick. And then it being emptied out. Never seen those guys again, and don't know what happened to them. But I recall we had this the base commander. I think it was the base commander. He came out and talked to us. All of us, all of everyone that was going through training. There and with in where I was on post, and he was telling us. He said there's an epidemic, and I want you guys to gargle with salt water, and so. How many guys went from Fort Jackson to Fort Gordon? And was it, were they different pathogens? I don't know, but there was a contagion with what I had. But then it's weird because initially when I had it at Fort Jackson, I don't think I gave it to anyone there. I don't know though. I don't know. I don't know. Man, I was so damn sick. Those barracks that I went through training in, they were the World War II barracks. They were atop of Tank Hill, and we were the last cycle to use those barracks. They tore them out after our cycle. We were the last cycle. I think that they planned to do it that way in case there was any, some unforeseen, like circumstance with contagion with that makes sense. But yeah, man, it's been pretty bad, through these years, especially since I got fucking injured in the Air Force, and in those injuries led to my having to have 2 spinal fusions. Fuck, as soon as my metabolism would drop, or my, anything that would affect my what can I say? Weaken me in some way. That virus would rear its head. I didn't know nothing about it. I never got treated for it. You know what I'm saying? Shit, probably could have had like antiviral drugs and shit that could have helped me, but I didn't have health care, but for a short period of time. There when my wife had it, but. What a fucked situation. I can tell you, it was. I tell people about this, man. I've reached out to, congressmen here in my district, 2 different congressmen, and I've spoken to. I'm saying people asking for help about this, and nobody fucking, will give this any attention. Isn't that something? I mean, we're talking about a fucking secret virus program. I tell you in truth, I was used as a goddamn test subject, and that was probably determined because I was a high school dropout. When I joined, it probably looked, and they were like, whoever fucking these high school dropouts, it determined that we were fucking disposable. I know that's what they did, but. And I can't get. Would you believe I can't get any fucking help? I know that, there were how many guys, were used as test subjects. This shit would be pretty easy for an investigator that's got some connections and know-how, savvy to do this, to find out everything about this shit. And I'm sure that there is still some statistician out there that is, some contractor that is still monitoring people that were used, kids that were used in that secret virus program. Now that was in 1983. So, over the years you get to thinking like, well, what the hell, maybe they, that was before AIDS. That's retroviruses that were wipe out, those that had that immune deficiency syndrome. So, I wondered if that was part of, the development, the experimenting with those retroviruses was right before, that was something that was done. I had heard, and I don't know, but that was something that was actually done. There were, or immunizations, supposed to be immunizations that were done by the World Health Organization. That was brought out. There was a secret virus flow chart that was discovered in the Library of Congress, and it was put there. Somebody put it there so that it would be found. And I actually saw that, and this has been 25 years ago. I saw that secret virus flow chart, and it showed that these viruses were engineered, and then they were through the World Health Organization under the auspice of goodwill, altruistically, helping people, to immunize them, for certain whatever diseases that then those retroviruses were. There were people that were given those, through that immunization program in different areas. It was like you wonder, well, why would they do that? And their theories, like maybe into areas like in Africa or wherever it might be, where there's natural resources that are untapped, and you'd slow them down from developing, the nations developing to such an extent where they could harvest, whether they could get those natural resources, whereas then they would be left untapped for someone to come in, plan to come in and get them later, and that sort of made sense. Does now, as far as why they would do that, and I don't know, or to take out like a hell, man. When you're talking about engineering viruses, that can target people's, hell, man. There's people that dedicate their lives, to the study of these things, so they can probably target someone, with their, I'm saying, where they're from, like what race they are, or, what I'm saying, what weaknesses some people have, strengths, weaknesses, they determine, can then engineer a virus that would target, like target a group of people. Yeah. Well, of course, that's something that you just know, that there's some wicked shit, man, that people do. And, I when I was then, when I went to Fort Pickett for one of those, like 2-week active exercises, and they split us up into like a buddies, and told us, they gave us this bottle of insect repellent, and they said, look, we want you to use this repellent, and on the hour we want you guys to strip down nude, and we want you to count, like you would count your buddy's ticks, and then he'll count how many are on you, because we want to see how good this repellent will work. This is what they told us. And I was like, after what I had gone through, I'm like, they injected me with that shit, going through boot camp. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And it, what I thought it was is that they had grown some ticks, a lot of ticks, and dumped them into, that area that we were conducting our exercises. And they wanted to see how good of a vector, those ticks were that they were using. And they might have been using other, but ticks are what they told us to count on one another. So that's probably what they did. When I say how fucking evil, man, using, though, a guardsman like that, reservist, as fucking, guinea pigs, test subjects for shit like that, But yeah, that's what was done to me. That was what was done to me, in truth. I'm sure there's a record of all of that, ain't that something? Isn't that something? So, I wonder, I'm like, you would think that I'd be able to get some kind of compensation for what the fuck they did to me. So I think that would be not unreasonable to ask for that. So especially what was done to me when I was in the Air Force. My God. I went in the Air Force, and that situation, going into the Air Force, you see, I was supposed to be a security policeman there at Lackland. I would have done my training there at Lackland. That's where their security police officers are trained. But I had brought with me a portfolio because I had a talent, I had a penchant for like audiovisual communications, but more specifically like graphics, dealing with when I say that, what would be like the like skills that a commercial artist has, but in the service, that is covers like. Anyway, look, I waited it out. They let me present my portfolio, and I was able to get into the career field, and I was even able to jump over my training. I didn't have to go to training or anything, so they let me do that. Just gave me a duty station, which was pretty wild. But I was really happy about that. Even though I had to wait there at Lackland, I was put in with a bunch of guys that were cycled out, and their attitudes were every other word was "fuck this place." They were like "fuck it, fuck this, fuck." They were like they had the worst attitude, man. I was like, "Oh my God, I hope I can survive this shit." But I made it out of there, and I my first my duty station then was Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma. But that those skills crossed over for, like, I'd help to put together briefings either on 35 millimeter or view graphs, those type of briefings. You need to have someone put all of that together, so that when you have mission briefings to communicate. So that was kind of cool. And also I would help put together simulators, for like pilots that were being trained in different planes, because we we worked with, it was a Mac base, but we also were part of SAC and TAC mission, like we would help them as well. So we had C5s, we had refuelers, those KC-135s, and we would have some fighter jets that would come in, like I'm saying, but it was a Mac base. It was really cool. So, I got to be part of a lot of different things. It was great. And, but the thing is, I had this really sadistic, black, NCOIC when I got there. And, he was a strange one, I'll tell you. Very prejudiced. But he isolated me from everyone and was studying me because he thought of himself as a psychologist. That's what everyone told me, because he had taken some courses. But it was whacked, man. Like he had separated me from everyone, and he was studying me. And everyone was coming up to me, like, at the end of the duty day, and they're like, "Hey, this, Beauchamp is really fucked up. We hate what he's doing to you, and he's an asshole." And they're telling me, I'm like, "Yeah, well, I had a decent attitude." I'm like, "Okay," but the thing is, he was really prejudiced, man, and I noticed that right away. This guy was. He was a trip, man. I was raised in an environment where there was a lot of prejudice, and I had something happen to me when I was in sixth grade. The only black, kid that was in my sixth grade, maybe my whole elementary school, Shenango, there in Lawrence County, Pennsylvania. But his name was Michael Carter, this black kid. He was there, and there were two other guys. We were standing around a desk, and I don't remember what I said to that kid, but I said something so hurtful that God, the Lord God Almighty, Yahweh, God Jehovah, caused to become in Jesus' name. I tell you, this is the truth. I felt his pain when I said something hurtful to that kid, and it was so strong. I was like in that like moment that was like wrapped in eternity. God just caused time to stand still. And I said, Lord, I said, please, I don't want to ever hurt anyone like this again. I don't want to be like this, because I recognized what I said was just parroted from what I heard from people that I was around. I was raised in that environment. And then, what happened was one of my mentors was this black guy that my dad worked with at Medusa Cement Company there in Wampum. This black guy, I would go coon hunting with him. And I had a lot of respect for him. God set this up because to become that I was this, he was my mentor. Him and I really respected him, man. I loved the guy. And even my dad was jealous of him, but then it's like when I got in the Air Force, I was dating this black girl there, and she was in the hospital squadron, and my NCOIC, Sergeant Beauchamp, the prejudiced, that sadistic, prejudiced man, he was making my life miserable, man. He was really irked by the fact that I was dating this black girl and this fellow Air Force service member, and he was making my life miserable. But I ended up I married her, Sherelle Turner, and we, we were in love, and but he was making my life miserable, and it wasn't just him in my unit, but he was the worst. And she had people in her squadron, the hospital squadron, who were making her miserable. It was a lot of prejudice. You wouldn't think, but there was. That this is back in 85, 86, 87, 88. Like I'm talking, there it is in those years. But anyway, I had no one I could go to. You see, I was in a detachment. My headquarters was at Lackland Air Force Base, the 1365th Audiovisual Squadron. And I was Detachment 4. And I had nowhere to go. And I was like, shit, what am I going to do? And I said, well, I was naive about it. I said, I'll go to social actions about this, this situation, about, this Beauchamp, my NCOIC. I'm like, I'll just do that. And I went over there and I spoke to the CO. His name, had an appointment with him. Captain Ayers was his name. And I knew right as soon as I met him, man, I could feel it. He was a very prejudiced man as well. I was like, oh, did I make a mistake? I shouldn't be here. I realized that at least for Altus Air Force Base, that social actions was there for the blacks. He was there for the African Americans, not me, man. Like, what a dummy I was to go over there. He was so cold, so prejudiced, man. Like, my goodness, Captain Ayers. I'm like, oh, is this a mistake? Now we're talking about base social actions. That was under the base command. So I got back to my unit, my detachment. And there is my NCOIC, Sergeant Beauchamp, Tech Sergeant Beauchamp. He's waiting for me. And he had an accent. You never forget it. The guy fucking tormented me. I remember him like I could even sound like him. Here's what he said to me. Airman Kosher, I just got off the phone with Captain Ayers. Him and I, we've been friends a long time. He told me you were over there saying bad things about me. That's what he said to me. And I was like, oh boy. Things just got worse, man. And it was bad. The thing is, if I would have been in Christ, would have been in the Word, I wasn't. And he was a real torment. It was bad. When he'd get me alone, that's when he would be the most, destructive. I'm not talking about him laying his hands on me, but mentally, like how he would so abusive. I really don't want to give you an example, because I'll tell you what, I really don't want to revisit it that close. If you don't mind, please. Yeah, he was bad. Let me tell you, he was bad. And I talked to my aunt in District 17, Pennsylvania, on the phone. My aunt, Leoma Swetlick. Her name was Omi to people that knew her. To me, she was Aunt O. But her name, Leoma Swetlick. Swetlick. My Uncle Bob Swetlick. Anyway, I was telling my Aunt O about this guy, Beauchamp, and how miserable this guy was making me, and fucking bad. I'm like, this guy, I can't do anything. There's no one I can go to. She said, Jimmy, I'm good friends with, Congressman who? I don't remember. I never even met the guy. I don't even know his name, in District 17 at that time. She said, I'm going to talk to him. And when she said that, yeah, I felt like maybe that's not a good thing. But I didn't say don't do it. But then within a couple weeks, I talked to her and I'm like, Anno, I called her again. I'm like, Anno, I'm thinking, I don't want you talking to your congressman. And she said, Jimmy, I already did. So then I'm like, oh shit, what does this mean? What's going to happen? I just saw red flags are going up, man. I'm like, what the hell? Now look, I was smart enough then, quick, and I'm like, you know what? This might mean some type of, they're going to be looking into something here. What the hell is going on? Now, I'm letting you know that because that would give me motivation to have my shit, tight. What I'm saying is, doing my job, making sure that everything is, over the time that it took for that congressional inquiry, it turned out to be a congressional inquiry, for it to open, there at Altus Air Force Base about that social actions issue. It took a long time because I kept thinking, man, when the hell is this going to happen? The thing is, in that interim, I had become recognized as being the best that the United States Air Force had in my AFSC. I was awarded. They actually awarded me as being the best that the Air Force had in my AFSC. And they told me my detachment chief, my NCOIC then was a different NCOIC because Beauchamp made first shirt. But my NCOIC, my detachment chief, everyone, they were telling me like you, 1365th Audiovisual, our headquarters, they said, you have been put in for orders to serve at the Pentagon in honor of being recognized, being awarded, being the best in your AFSC. And yeah, that was quite a high. I was at the pinnacle of where, like everything was looking good. Look, I gave my all to, my work, my service, so I'd put in the time. I would, spend that extra time and, in each, what I'm saying is I would have done the same thing at the Pentagon. And I think I could have, gone as high as the ceiling was as an enlisted man. After serving at the Pentagon, I know that I would have had my sights on projects that would have I'd have had goals like I want to be working for the president. That's the kind of I know that's what I was thinking when they told me. I'm like, of course you just start, you're like, well, yeah. What? I was ambitious, and so there it was, I'm like keeping myself not, just trying to be humble, be cool. Then, after all this time, that congressional inquiry hit the base. just after I was told that there were orders being cut for me to serve at the Pentagon in honor of being recognized and awarded as being the best that the United States Air Force had in my AFSC. In truth, I was even fast-tracked for NCO. I didn't even have to go to NCO school. That's the truth. That's all part of record. You know, the thing is, when they hit the base, this is what's really horrible here. Listen to this. My base commander, Colonel Hazeltine, who I had a working relationship with, I was involved in at least one pretty big project with, the base commander, with base command. It was really cool, but that was quite an honor. But I was told by two different people that Colonel Hazeltine was passed over for Brigadier General because of the congressional inquiry. So my unit, my detachment, that shit, I don't know how that was orchestrated, because, the next thing I know, I was set up in my work area where two airmen, Airman Bemis and Airman Dallaire, they stood in my way of this CompuGraphics room. We got this CompuGraphics system for, that we were like the only detachment that had, the first detachment that had that system. That all went with, with me being awarded as being, the best in my AFSC. We got things, that was cool. And these two airmen, Dallaire and Bemis, they blocked my way from coming out of that room. And I knew it. I'm like, I sensed it. I'm like, these guys have been, instructed to do this shit. I was being set up. And I still, though, I like, playfully, I said, get the fuck out of my way. But then I said, they just fucking stood there in my way. It was like, like adrenaline hit time. I don't know if there was jealousy with Dallaire and Bemis. There was with Bemis. Dallaire, he was with the honor guard. I don't know why he would be jealous of me. I thought he was a pretty good airman. He wasn't good in the career field that I was in. He wasn't good there, and neither was Bemis. But there was a jealousy. There is a lot of that kind of shit. But then I did say, I was forceful. I did say, get the fuck out of my way, man. And then the next thing, they took that as a justification to have me removed from my work area, from the detachment. And then I was given to correctional custody, but I wasn't a prisoner. I was assigned to work with them. Like, I'd be out there picking up cigarette butts out at the front gate with them. They just wanted to break me down. But, what I understood, I discerned as much. I knew that then, after, hearing about Colonel Hazeltine being passed over for Brigadier General, I'm like, you know what? They're going to fucking try to get rid of me. Or they're going to try to make me look bad. I knew that was what was going on. But you have to keep in mind, I was just awarded as being the best that the Air Force had in my AFSC. I was awaiting orders to work to serve at the Pentagon in honor of that. That's all true. So, there are different sets of records. There's my detachment, there's my, my base command, there's going to be several sets of records from Altus Air Force Base, because they moved me around then, to work with different units. Some pretty shitty, I was raised on a farm. It wasn't like it was beneath me, man. Whatever the hell they had me do was fine. Whether it's, carrying out, shitty, soiled, pissy mattresses out of old dormitories, whatever the hell it was, whatever. Good, okay. Whatever the job, whatever you got. It's okay. It went on for, it seemed like a long time. I don't know. A couple months. I don't know. It seemed like, but then my last duty, would you believe, I was assigned to base command, where there was a staff sergeant that was also assigned they put this desk in this area in base command, in this area where there was no traffic. Nobody entered into this area. I don't know where it was within the complex, within the base command, but nobody came in there. But I was given a direct order to sit at attention in this wooden chair. Now, I mentioned that I had injuries that led to my having to have 2 spinal fusions. Those injuries were raw at that time, raw spinal injuries. And, sitting at attention, being made to sit at attention, you try doing that without having any physical disabilities, any pain. Or, sitting will give you pain, I would guess, but with the injuries, it was torture. So what they were trying to do, they wanted me to disobey like a direct order. They were trying their best to, they wanted to discharge me. You understand? They had nothing. Whatever they put together, they wanted me to sign. You see, that's it. They're like, then they told me, after I was put in this position where I'm sitting at attention, why am I sitting here? I didn't know. What are you doing to me? I couldn't even ask a question. I had nobody. There I am. I was able to fool myself into believing that whoever the hell it was, whatever congressional aid, they were looking for me, right? In reality, that was in District 17 in Pennsylvania, where that congressman, my aunt Leoma Svetlik, she talked to whoever that congressional representative was. They weren't coming for me. I had nobody. They denied me to even be able to go to the hospital. This whole thing cost me my marriage. I ended up going through a divorce. They told me my unit, when they're like, if you have nothing to do with her, my NCOIC, she said, Sergeant Gardner, she said, maybe I'll help you. They were prejudiced too, is what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? But I noticed when things really changed there within my unit and my detachment, when the directive was coming from base command, from Colonel Hazeltine. Everything changed then, because then there was nothing. There was no mercy, and I was treated like a stranger. That's how they just disassociated themselves with me. But being seated at attention, the staff sergeant that they assigned to sit there and, to remind me that I was to sit at attention, like if I would start, because I would shift because I was in so much pain, because those injuries were raw, man. I did have to have the fusions. I had them after I got out of the Air Force. And I couldn't get any help from the VA when I went for help. Nothing, man. They interviewed me and wouldn't treat me, wouldn't do nothing. That you can find in a polygraph examination I volunteered to take about that. That's within my records. Bring out that everything I'm talking about. There's a couple things here, but. I would take a polygraph about any of this. That's the only time I've ever taken a polygraph. It was about my injuries because, one of the injuries I had to my neck, I was out at having a beer, with my subordinate, Daniel J. Finn, who, was, he stayed in and retired after 20 years. But there was a guy that was behind me. I didn't know this, but Dan, the music was loud, and Dan was he was like telling me something. He's like to look behind me, because there was this dancer that came over, and she was flirty, man, but I wanted nothing to do with her, nothing. I was just courteous. I'm like, oh, hey, I had nothing to do with her. And there was some jerk off that was at the bar that must have liked that girl. Anyway, I turned my head to look at what Dan was talking about, and this guy fucking sucker punched me. He hit me so fucking hard. He mangled my neck, man. But I when I went off of the chair, I slid on the floor, and I had tunnel vision. He had knocked me out, but then I came to and I had tunnel vision, and I had my senses enough that I knew, because he was charging in on me. I could see him. He was coming in to, fucking, we're in that condition to beat the fuck out of me, and I was able to get up on my feet and act like he hadn't hurt me. And then he backed off, being the fucking coward that he was. He could have only done that, only sucker punch me, But that guy fucking mangled my neck. Anyway, why do I bring that up? That was raw, man. And so was the other injury to my lumbar spine. And how that happened, I was running across a field on base, and on my way to lunch at they call it the Solar Inn. That was the name of where we had, where our, oh my God. The Solar Inn. That's where we would eat. God almighty. I just had, anyway, hear this. The sun was in my eyes, and I didn't see. There was a culvert that was open. It was unmarked, and I fell into it. It's because they had done some construction, but where I was running through, there was nothing marked that there was any construction. I know that I was in a new building. They put us into a new building and everything. Our detachment. But I never saw that hole, and I fell into it, and that's how I hurt my back. And man, I took a hell of a hit. That was something else, man. So, from that, that injury to my lumbar like that, I didn't get any time off from work from either one of those injuries. Why am I telling you about this? Just to, imagine that though, I would have to lay over, like countertops, lay like to take the pressure off of my lumbar. Fuck, man. I suffered with, I had to have them fused, but I waited years, man, to get those surgeries because I couldn't get, the help from the VA. And, the thing is, I waited too long. And the surgeon that did it, Dr. James Dwyer, he was one of the best spinal surgeons in his time. I was fortunate, man. He ate all the costs, in truth. That's a whole other story. But I'll tell you, the thing about injuring your intervertebral discs, they'll show up on an MRI as darkened, over time with what they call degenerative disc disease. From the time you have you injure your disc, you herniate them. It's like, I don't know about today if there's any way that they can help, whatever therapy or medications to keep them from deteriorating, from degenerating. But you can see, somebody knows how to read an MRI. They know, they can know how long, you have had, injuries to your discs. They darken, Yeah, everything I'm saying is true. There's no deception. I took a polygraph. I volunteered, and there was no deception. And the polygraph examiner was a former government polygraph examiner. He was not my friend. This guy, was not friendly at all until after everything was done. Then he was really friendly because he knew that I was being honest. And he even had empathy for me, from me being turned away from the VA, needing the spinal fusions. All that really irked him. But he wasn't able to do anything to help me with that. But he did help me with the polygraph. I was grateful that he did that. He did that, what do they call that, pro bono? Pro bono? Is that what it's called? And he did that as charity. So he helped me out. But being, there seated at attention, let me tell you, I was there so long that I literally, this is what happened. I lost track of time and days. And I had this thing happen. It was, try to relate to this. But, oh my goodness. Like right now, I got a lot of pain just sitting here. Okay. Because my pain's inveterate from my, because I got scar tissue on my thecal sac that protects our spinal cord. That's what Dr. Dwyer told me, that I waited too long. That's why I got inveterate pain. But I wasn't going to sign what they wanted me to. I didn't even look at it, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to cooperate with that because I know that they can't do this. What I'm saying is, I know if I get some help, I can fight this, and I'm going to overcome. But I lost my will to fight. I don't know if it was the pain that I was enduring. And you think about it. You just like all you can think about is like, fuck. I'm gonna have to. This is all fight. I'm gonna have to come up against, those that now are complicit in all of this. I'm gonna have to out them. There are several people in my detachment, that then were complicit in then following through with backdating, fabricating, my records, that kind of shit, and disqualifying me on things that I was the go-to guy in my detachment. I was awarded. Again, I know this. I can't help but tell you again and again. I was recognized and awarded as being the best that the United States Air Force had in my AFSC. And they were bringing me in from details before they put me in that last duty to sit at attention over there at base command. They would bring me in from out, and to disqualify me on shit. So they were trying to, make it look like, I was a fuck up or whatever. Isn't that something? I mean, when you look at, I would think that when you see that, from a 1365th, the audiovisual squadron, headquarters squadron at Lackland Air Force Base, my headquarters, you would see that, I had been given the award from them, and and they were working on my orders being cut to serve at the Pentagon. You would see that, and you juxtapose that with this bullshit. You know what I'm saying? It should be pretty obvious. Everything I'm saying should bear the truth out pretty quick. You would think so, right? But there was a point, look, I had something happen, like this moment where something like snapped. I had this it was like a shift. Something happened, and it was like, my mind. Something happened, and I'm telling you, when it happened, I recognized it, and I said, man, I wonder if that's what that is. I had something that snapped, where it was weird, man. I was like, I knew I was in trouble. Something was going on here. Everything I was going through was, there was more to it than I had realized. Now, they did this all purposely to get me in this state, of, because like I said, I'd gone through now this divorce, and I'm fucking, the way that they had fucked with me, and then they were torturing me. Do you know that they had arranged for me to go see the base psychiatrist then? Because they wanted me to be all fucked up. When I got over there with him, anything I fucking said, I sound like I'm a fucking paranoid. He didn't know anything, but he was a company man. He was there to fucking put together what they needed, to make me look bad. I don't know what it was that he said about me. It's in, my records. But whatever it is, look, I had served, with honor and what? Look, there's no record of me ever having any problems, like any I was never did I have any trouble, any problems. Yes, I was going to say with distinction in the Air Force and even with the Army National Guard. Even after going through that shit, I did well. When I was in the Guard, I just didn't want nothing to do with the Army, man. I made a choice that I wanted the United States Air Force. I wanted to be in the Air Force, and that's why I went active duty Air Force. After what was done, me being injected with that shit, I really didn't want to stay in the Army. So, anyway, yeah, they got to me. They got to me, and look. This is really what happened. I lost track of how many days, that I was, there at base command where they had me seated at attention, and this is what happened. When I told them, I said, I'll sign whatever you want to. I agreed to. I said I will. Then they had me sit there at attention for another 4 days. And I thought, man, this is really, it's kind of fucking cruel. I'm like, why would they have me sit here? Why would they do this? I'll sign with you. It was fucking crazy, man. But I think that was, they were trying to get me to fucking break, like where you get some kind of reaction, where I, would get angry or, but I didn't, I didn't react how they wanted me to. So, they couldn't give me a bad discharge, but they did give me a general. And they banned me from the base. Why they banned me from the base is because they thought, after what they had done to me, that I might, it was possible that I could, be looking for some type of revenge, I guess. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It was tough. Don't get me wrong. I had to put all that behind me. Who the hell would believe me? My family, friends. I didn't talk to anybody about what happened. Because it sounded like I was fucking making it up. It sounded so unbelievable. And, but it's the truth. So many years, man. I had to just put that all behind me. And, it's not like you can put it all behind you when you, fucking have to have 2 spinal fusions and you got a fucking retrovirus that you're nursing along to, that was given to you. But, so, I would think, that there's a record of all this shit and that I could ask for a fair and just result in all of this. What do you think? What do you think? Hearing what I just said. Now, if you're prejudiced, you're like, you think, well, he's a race traitor. Maybe if you're white, you see, it's fucking, maybe you just don't like the idea of a mixed couple. It's kind of a tough situation that way. You have to find someone would empathize with you that's not prejudiced. It's harder to do than you think, I'll tell you. It really is. I've had to suppress, that sense, knowing when somebody's fucking prejudiced. Because, I've been married to this black woman now, this other black woman, 34 years. Anyway, here's my wife now, Norsiva. I'm going to talk to her. Wait a minute. So you're just going to put some music on?
Yeah, a little bit I will when I start getting tired.
When you start getting tired? Huh?
My hands are froze. I had to clean my car out, and my hands are froze.
I'm sorry to hear that, girl. Your hand. Well, I told you, we're supposed to have some really cold.
I know.
That's
why I'm coming home now. I ain't playing no games. I'm being my own house freezer.
Being your own house freezer, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, if that's what it takes, I ain't gonna be up here with nobody else.
I
Be at home.
hear you, girl. I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah. So one, I got 2.5 hours. So one, two, and you know, and then Camille want to go drop everybody else off before she bring me to my car. Say, Camille, could you just please take me to my car? Come on. Everybody said, take her to her car
Oh,
first.
no. Really? Really?
Oh
Girl.
man.
I'm sorry to hear that, babe. I'm sorry.
Oh man. But I'm
Did I miss my call? What do you mean?
yeah.
No, I just wanted to hear you on the hear you. So I'm gonna walk around here. I got something I'm gonna do in the kitchen. I want to hear you. Talk to me. I'm here. Cold, huh? Well, you've got how long to go, you think? How long? Okay. Well, you're gonna, God willing, Yah willing, you'll get in here at about